So at the end of the Madoka Magica episode, we were talking about music because I was still kind of gushing about the music in that television show, that piece of animation. Why is
Yeah.
there a black van pulling up outside? That's weird. Anyway, yeah, so I was just gushing about that music, and I think it was either you or me floated the idea of just like, hey, let's send some songs back and forth, and let's talk about what makes them beautiful. And so the first one we're going to talk about, I sent you a one of my favorite songs by my favorite artist off of my favorite album. The
Mm.
song is "Shelter from the Storm" from 1976. The artist is Bob Dylan off the album Blood on the Tracks. It is an acoustic piece featuring voice, guitar, harmonica, and an electric bass. It is about his impending divorce, and that is all I will give you. What did you think?
Okay. Well, I think it's a very good song. I think it. There are a few specific reasons why it is very good and why it kind of has a pretty universal appeal that I think we can discuss, and we can discuss why it captures that. I'd like to focus on the first stanza because I think that has a lot of what makes it beautiful overall. Is in the first stanza.
You can pull that up. First stanza, 'twas in another lifetime, one of toil and blood, when blackness was a virtue, the road was full of mud. I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form. Say it with me. Come in, she said, I'll give ya shelter from the storm.
All right, I'm gonna reread it because that was dog shit.
Fair play, fair play.
'Twas in another lifetime, one of toil and blood, when blackness was a virtue, the road was full of mud. I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form. Come in, she said, I'll give you shelter from the storm. Now, just going down this stanza, we have this imagery of another lifetime, one of toil and blood, and I think this sort of harkens back to a time in distant human history when things were more difficult. You know, life was about toil and blood. And in addition to the next line, which names virtue and says the road was full of mud, evoking the idea that virtue is important and roads are generally unpaved. They're generally, they're generally part of the wilderness. And so I think this is giving a lot of imagery of sort of medieval times, or if not medieval, then the setting of classical medieval tales. Right.
Mm-hmm.
As a feature of classical medieval tales, they focus on ideas of virtue, adventure. I came in from the wilderness, and then at the end there's of course the woman that you win at the end of the adventure. Come in, she said. I'll give you shelter from the storm. And this woman is healing your pain at the end of a long journey in these classical medieval tales. And so I think that what gives the song part of its wide appeal is the cultural background that it's tapping into of these sort of medieval tales, these classic heroic tales, these adventure stories, and we sort of all appreciate those as part of the fantasy genre today, and you get a lot of imagery tapping into that and giving it that sort of aesthetic that I think everyone in the West can appreciate.
I definitely agree. I will glow about Dylan a lot. I think he's a brilliant writer, but I think that it is his literary knowledge that makes a lot of his songs so deep. Because even if we all haven't, read maybe the classical medieval tales or the classic American literature or the classic European
Mm-hmm.
literature, it's still very much familiar in our brains. The American Studies scholar, Dr. Thomas Doherty, calls it the reptile brain. These stories are deep within our reptile brains, and Dylan does a good job of calling upon those. I can't name you a story of I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form, but that just sounds so familiar, doesn't it? And that's, I think,
It does.
the broad appeal of folk music as a genre that can kind of trace its way back to medieval English literature with those ballads do bear a striking similarity and sort of share the same lineage with the stuff that was written in the folk music revival and was written later in the 70s and was written by folk artists today.
Right. So, since you're more familiar with the song than I am, can you sort of walk us through the story that this song is telling?
Yeah. So, gladly. Blood on the Tracks is probably my favorite album of all time,
Mm-hmm.
and it paints the picture of Dylan's sort of chaotic love life with the sort of collapse of his marriage with Sarah Dillon
Mm-hmm.
um, throughout the course of the album. Uh, you have songs on there that are talking about the sort of their meeting in a song like Tangled Up in Blue. You have songs that make sort of vaguer allusions to love, like Simple Twist of Fate. You have songs that are more meditations on love, like Buckets of Rain. This, I think, lies sort of somewhere in the middle of all of those, where it is
Mm-hmm.
not. It is about love and loss. It is. It has moments of specificity, but it also has its fantastical moments. This song, from my interpretation, is him sort of describing in a rather fantastical way how Sarah was the woman who was giving him shelter from the storm being maybe the chaos that he was undergoing in the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
the peace that she brought him, and through the way that that line "I'll give you shelter from the storm" changes meaning throughout the song. It begins, "I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form," uh, and it sort of turns into, once the love starts to fall apart, "I'll give you shelter from the storm" becomes like this sarcastic, biting remark.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've heard newborn babies wailing like a mourning dove, an old man with broken teeth stranded without love. Do I understand your question? Is it hopeless and forlorn? Come in, she said, I'll give you shelter from the storm. I mean, in that sense, he is not giving his praises to the girl. He is talking about how empty love feels. So this, I think, is a very indicative moment of the entire album, where you see both the highs and the lows, and it is both, fantastical, and also there was some very sort of specific commentary on his life. My favorite, of course, being, because I tell this to everyone who will listen, the second to last stanza, where he talks about
Mm.
them gambling for his clothes. I have always interpreted as a fantastic metaphor for divorce, that he is in the little
Ah,
hilltop
yeah.
village, the courthouse on the top of the hill, and they
Yeah,
gamble
that's
for
kind
his
of funny.
clothes. He bargains for salvation, and they gave him a lethal dose. So that is how that is how I would that is how I would introduce people to this song.
So this kind of we didn't talk about it in the last episode, but in Madoka Magica, the
Jesus
way
Christ.
that you perceive the ending theme, the lyrics of the ending theme, changes throughout the series. You originally read it from Madoka's perspective, and then you slowly start to read it from Homer's perspective, which climaxes in episode 10. You finally understand every word of the ending theme because you now know what Homer has been through. And at the end, in episode 12, you can again read it from Monica's perspective, but as her ascended form. And I think that the beauty of the changing meaning of the ending theme like that is sort of in the complexity and the intellectual engagement that you receive from that. And I think it's a similar idea with this "Come in," she said, "I'll give you shelter from the storm." I think it's a similar idea for why this line is so beautiful by the end of the song and it never becomes boring. It's because the intellectual engagement and complexity and nuance that's in this this line really gives it a lot of life in the song, and it makes it a very valuable centerpiece.
It's the innovation upon folk music. These repeated lines. I could very well be wrong, but I have heard that these repeated lines at the end of the songs were meant in the early days to be call and response bits. Um,
Mm.
we no longer sing these as call and response. This isn't sung as call and response. So I think it's a very tactful innovation to, instead of making this just the line that everyone else can say, to have it change its meaning. I almost sent you from the same album, Tangled Up in Blue, instead, which is very similar in that what Blue is and how he is tangled changes. Sometimes it's she went down to tie the laces of my shoes, tangled up in blue, quite literal, and other times it's keep on keeping on, like a bird that flew, tangled up in blue, a bird stuck in the sky almost. It's a beautiful image. But yeah, I think it's a tactful innovation on folk music.
Right, and on the subject of folk music, I think that part of what gives it this folky vibe is definitely the music itself. The fact that there is only a guitar and a subtle bass line evokes the idea that this could have been played back in the day by a medieval bard in an inn, recounting, perhaps his name was Frustus even, recounting some heroic tale, and that adds to the vibe of the fantasy of the lyrics.
I love. I mean it sounds ridiculous being said, but I mean no, you're right. It is the simplicity and ubiquity of the music that makes it so attractive. I mean Dylan as a character is in keeping with he is a product of Woody Guthrie, who is himself a product of Walt Whitman, and Walt Whitman is the American response to the Bard of medieval times. I don't know what that means.
I don't know who these people are.
Okay, let me think of an anime metaphor. Bob Dylan is. Okay, I've seen one.
Bob Dylan is Monica.
I've seen one anime, but I can do an anime metaphor. Give me a second. Bob Dylan is Spy X Family.
Go on.
In the sense that salty anime fans are going to review bomb Spy X Family the same way that they review bombed Hunter x Hunter or whatever.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Listen, it makes sense if you're an anime connoisseur like me. You've only seen like 3 animes, Maganatari, Medica Magica, and Re:Zero plotlines. So I am the anime god. You are the anime zero. Back to Bob Dylan. I had a question.
Re:Zero animes. That's what they call me.
more like zero rewatch value. Am I right?
Yeah, man.
Okay, I had a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
The delivery of the song is very peaceful, melancholic. Dylan performs this song live some year or two later, as part of his sort of electric tour. The Hard Rain Tour is what it's called, and the song is electric and chaotic and intense. And I was wondering if you could talk about what you think sort of the intensity of the instrumentation can do to the meaning of the song. Do you think that that if Shelter from the Storm were delivered intensely, would it change its meaning? Or do you think that the underlying story is sort of resistant to the musicality that surrounds it?
Can I ask you, what's the chronology here? Like, when did he divorce his wife?
Around 77. Let's see. When did Dylan divorce Sarah? 1977. So this is middle of 1977, but it was coming since 74.
Okay. Then I don't know. Because what I was gonna say is, what it sounds like, it sounds a bit more triumphant. It sounds like he's kind of he's singing it like he's reminiscing on what it meant, and he's singing it like he no longer cares, like he no longer gives a damn. He's throwing caution to the wind. He's just singing out the song, putting his heart into it, singing it like it was something that happened in the past and now he can move on. Maybe that's not the case.
Yeah. I think that is the case. I frankly, I mean, God, it's 76 at this point. This man's, you don't drop an album about how much you hate your current wife and then expect that marriage to work. I mean, only Beyonce could do that, because she is the queen bee, and Bob Dylan is no queen bee. No, I mean you're right. It is much more unhinged. It is much more a caution into the wind. I mean, I think that the Hard Rain tour is completely wild and great. The man is on stage like a phoenix, just exploding into flames. Because when he comes back in '78, he's like a completely changed man, and like 3 years later, he finds Jesus.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like.
This motherfucker listen to this song being like, yeah, you know what this sounds like? You know what this sounds like? This man's gonna find Jesus in 3 years.
He's gonna find Mario.
Then he's going to become a Buddhist and then a Kabbalist.
Oh yeah. Never mind.
No. Tell me. What does Kabbalism remind you of?
No, I was gonna say he's moving on from Qasir.
This Bob. If Bob Dylan was a magical girl, what do you think his wish would be?
To make his wife disappear.
Do you think
to give him shelter from the storm?
How long do you think it would take Bob Dylan to become a witch?
You already said he'll become Jesus.
I said he'll find Jesus. He won't become Jesus.
He'll become Jesus. He'll reach enlightenment.
That's a good topic. Music. What would be some historical figures' wishes to Cube? For instance, Anne Frank. What do you think Anne Frank wished for?
Moving on. I
want to know canonically. What did Anne Frank wish for that wasn't not dying in Treblinka or Bergen-Belsen? Where she died in Bergen-Belsen, right? I don't know. She died in one of those two.
Listen, buddy. She had already made her wish by that time.
Jesus Christ. This is vile. Oh, this is vile. I hate this all.
Why'd you bring this up?
I don't know. I'm still angry about it.
All right, moving on. I have something I wanted to bring up.
I can't get demonetized. I don't have 1,000 subscribers.
So another reason that I think this song has some wide and universal appeal is a topic that Edmund Burke wrote about in his essay, The Sublime. I'll just read a few sentences from it.
Please do.
He says, "No passion so effectively robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as fear. To make anything very terrible, obscurity seems in general to be necessary. When we know the full extent of any danger, when we can accustom our eyes to it, a great deal of the apprehension vanishes. Everyone will be sensible of this, who considers how greatly night adds to our dread in all cases of danger, and how much the notion of ghosts and goblins, of which none can form clear ideas, affect minds, which give credit to the popular tales concerning such sorts of things."
Where are you going with this, buddy? You went up to ghosts and goblins. I'm not following here.
Wait. It is this idea of obscurity and terror that adds to the feeling of what he calls the sublime, of which he says, "The passion caused by the great and sublime in nature, when those causes operate most powerfully, is astonishment. And astonishment is that state of the soul in which all its motions are suspended with some degree of horror." And so this is what he argues is the beauty in nature. The beauty that nature arouses is that feeling of awe coming from the terror and obscurity of nature. And so Bob Dylan references a lot of this. He says, "When blackness was a virtue, I came in from the wilderness, a creature void of form." And then, of course, the repeating line, "I'll give you shelter from the storm." There are many things in this song that are very obscured. They're very terrifying. You don't understand their nature. There's a lot that's unknown about them. And so, just like, a fantastical beast whose nature you can never understand and who's, more powerful than anything in a fantastical story, there are all of these ideas contributing in the song also to that sense of fantastical awe, that sense of the sublime. And I think that's something that makes it very beautiful as well.
It does make it very beautiful. I hadn't considered that. You mentioned you said I want to talk about obscurity as like a single Discord message before we recorded this episode, and I was like, "What are you talking about, my brother in Christ?" I did not think that you would go there. That is very interesting, and it reminds me a lot. I know you said that the name Walt Whitman didn't mean a lot to you, but that reminds me a lot of sort of like transcendentalism and like sort of America's views on nature in the late 19th century that informed a lot of the canon that Dylan would draw from.
I think it was very much a feature of late 19th century art with the surge in popularity of realism and the return to like classical Renaissance styles.
The Industrial Revolution was a mistake.
You get a lot of art from that period of vast, awe-inspiring landscapes that you don't see for the next century, and I think that very much taps into the idea of the sublime, and this is the idea that that Bob Dylan is trying to evoke.
Yes, there are many references to the sublime in Dylan in sort of folk music of the time. The last thing I would like to touch on before we move on to your piece is a little bit about the mechanics of the song. One thing that he plays a lot with is tense, and changing the tense of a song isn't revolutionary, but it is a very interesting rhetorical strategy, and I think it's very subtle here, whereas in some other songs he's a lot more heavy-handed with it. 'Twas in another lifetime, one of toil and blood. If you pass this way again, you can rest assured. And then the first sort of half of the song is in the past tense. I was burned out from exhaustion. Not a word was spoke. There was little risk involved. Suddenly I turned around. She was standing there. And then sort of as a marking place in the middle, now there is a wall between us. The deputy walks on hard nails. I have heard newborn babies. In a little hilltop village, they gambled for my clothes. I'm living in a foreign country now. In the middle of the song, he changes tense. As opposed to at the end, as opposed to, eliciting a different meaning by changing at the end of the song, he does it in the middle. And I want to know, what do you think is accomplished by changing the tense of the song, changing who he's talking to and when he's talking, and how he sort of approaches the listener in the middle of the song, as opposed to anywhere else?
Well, I think this is very clearly when the meaning of "come in," she said, "I'll give you shelter from the storm" changes, it seems that he's shifting his tone from describing the woman as with silver bracelets on her wrists and flowers in her hair. She walked up to me so gracefully and took my crown of thorns. It's very all this very beautiful imagery, and then it switches to their relationship and the struggles, and there's no beautiful imagery anymore, right? It's the deputy walks on hard nails, and old men with broken teeth. Yeah, there's nothing beautiful there anymore, and there's nothing beautiful in their relationship anymore, and he's mourning the loss of the beauty in their relationship in the switch between the tense and also the language that he uses.
Yeah, I've always thought it was interesting that even after he switches the tense and he moves away from beauty, he doesn't describe the not beautiful imagery is not told in the present tense. It's still told in the past tense. I've seen men with broken teeth, and it kind of elicits you can really take it two ways. You can either say this is the world appearing less beautiful now that the love is lost, or you can honestly even say that it's kind of like a retrospective, that now that the illusion is broken, I realized that the world was not as beautiful just because she made me feel safer. She was the shelter from the storm, but I've heard newborn babies cry. I've seen men with broken teeth stranded without love. The one-eyed Undertaker blowing his feudal horn, whatever that means. I've got no idea. I got nothing for that. But
feudal horn.
Futile, not feudal. But it's all of that just to create something that is very personal and yet very abstract, and that is just pure quintessential Dylan. And if there was a word I could use to describe this song, it would be beautiful.
Yes, indeed. And with that, let's move on to our next piece.
Dude,
That would be.
I made that simple tuna pasta was so good.
I'm glad you think so.
I mean, for real, like, I know that you can't cook, but like, for real, just like, chop up.
I literally
up
cooked
some
a
garlic.
Master Chef level patty melt the other day.
You at least you called it a patty melt because you keep putting it in between like rye bread for no reason. I don't know why you can't just like find hamburger buns for the hamburgers
Because
that you seem to
the
make
better
every day.
the bread is better. I like it.
Man, my man eating
Cope-
5-inch thick
literally cope with
burgers
seafood.
on very thinly sliced bread. All I'm saying is just listen, just man, just like slice up some garlic, slice up half a chili,
No.
fry it in oil with some tomatoes.
Nah, fam.
Put the pasta in. Put a little bag of tuna in there and mix it up. Add some of the pasta water. Emulsify the sauce, and literally just like throw on some arugula so you can pretend that you're healthy, and it is very good.
Surely.
Mamma mia. Mucho Italiano.
And with that,
Aki.
let's move on to the Travelier.
It did not sound, if I was being honest, like it was telling a complete story.
Mhm.
It sounded as if it was building. I liken it when I was listening to this for absolutely no reason. I was reminded of Stravinsky's The Rite of Spring, specifically the Firebird ending portion, the one with the famous ballet, where the song sort of it has a similar thing where it repeats the same motif, first with
Mhm.
one section. I believe it's the violin section. The entire orchestra comes in, repeating it. Something similar happens in Atonement, is the name of the song.
Mhm.
But this one doesn't seem to. It has a climax, but the climax doesn't seem to have us arrive at a resolution. It's almost like it's building and it's building, and something, and I'm not really sure what happens. I need to listen to the song more. Something happens in the story of this song, but it's not a climax. It's not a triumphant resolution. It's almost like this is an unfinished journey that our traveler does not get to the safe home at the end. Perhaps they turn into the forest and then the screen fades to black, is almost like what it sounds like to me, if you can excuse my pretentious dramatism.
All right, so you actually picked up on the fact that this was not the end of the story pretty well. This is actually the 12th song in the 18-song long OST for the video game Journey.
Jesus
Have you
Christ.
heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard of Journey because of that. I remember when it came out that all the video game publications were circle jerking that Journey is the greatest video game ever made, but I was like 10 years old, and so I was like, why are there no guns in this game?
It is a good game. It's not the
I'm
greatest game
sure
ever,
it is.
but it is a good game. And it has extremely beautiful music. And this is a song that plays, in the 12th of 18 chapters, I suppose, of the game. 18 chapters through your journey, and this is near a low point in the game. And if you paid attention closely, you can hear a lot of whooshing sand sounds in the background of the music. You can hear that in the background of a lot of these songs. Some more prominently than others. I was wondering, since you always listen to music with lyrics, and this has no lyrics, what is some of the symbolism that you were able to pick up on despite the lack of lyrics, and what do you think it means?
I resent the notion that you think I only listen to music with symbolism, because I took a graduate level music theory class that was like all classical music, so I listened to a bunch of classical music, and it was terrible. But I got an A. Symbolism in this song, and sort of that I noticed in my very surface level analysis of symphonic pieces, is that the entire sort of harmonic range is used. Because you have high to low, right?
Mhm.
So long as the instrument can articulate notes, it will be used, and the talented composer does use them, and not always in the same way. I have heard pieces where the high violin is uh, the laughing child, the weeping woman, or people mocking you. Um,
Hmm.
but in this case, I felt that the symbolism was not individual characters. It was maybe more a building sense of self. Um, there was this repeated motif, um, sort of where the song begins with the drums sort of like coming to a head, and then everything sort of drops out, and then this motif that's repeated throughout the song, uh, is played by various sections of the symphony that we have here, until the band sort of comes back in,
Mhm.
uh, with the notes becoming more in time, less drawn out, moving less freely. They become a little bit more regimentalized. Um, to me, the symbolism is not characters. It is, maybe our hero walking, and then something happens to drop out everything. They are now in a wilderness, and they're stumbling along, and they gain their strength back. They gain it back more. They gain it back more. Of course, like I said, it doesn't end. We don't have a triumphant end, but we do have sort of maybe a regaining of our strength coming to a climax. Um, Even
Yeah.
though there were no lyrics, I thought that the vocal work was very good. There was a lot of attention to the overtone series, uh, in the harmonies. Um, Very clearly, the people who did this did their homework, which I would expect, because God, how much money is going to video games these days? Like millions of
It
dollars.
was an indie game. Relax.
Listen, how much money did like Mighty Number Nine raise on Kickstarter? I'm sure this game got money.
I'm sure it made money, but the whole game is like 2 hours long.
The elites need to stop funneling their money into shell companies like Journey.
Okay. So I'm glad you picked up on a lot of the sort of the absence of characters, because this game is certainly about a journey of self-discovery, of trying to understand, a lone figure trying to understand their place in this world, uh, that is that has ruins and murals of an ancient civilization scattered around, and trying to understand the nature of their existence. So you definitely picked up on that. You also picked up on the fact that I believe this song comes in when your main character falls down into a pit of very angry snakes who are trying to kill you whenever they see you, and this is definitely a point of weakness. As the title implies, your character is atoning for the sin of disturbing these creatures. I think the idea of atonement is also present in the bells that you hear throughout the song that give it a kind of church feel. Ideas of disturbing something sacred that you should not have come across. But this is not the lowest point in the entire game. You certainly do come out of it, of this pit, stronger, understanding a bit more, and ready for the next challenge.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, in the entire 18-piece epic, where is the high point?
The high point is between two songs. The first is they both occur at the end. The first is called
Mm-hmm.
Apotheosis. The second is called I Was Born for This.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
These are songs at the end. Oh, sorry, please.
Yes.
Keep going.
Apotheosis is, or I Was Born for This is pieces of literature about various heroic journeys and discussions of returning home, leaving everything behind, and ascending, making the apotheosis at the end of this great journey.
Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to ask of you is, because in the classical story, the climax is never the end, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in contrapuntal music and sort of that era of classical music, the climax was also not the end. It was drilled into our heads when we were learning this stuff, that the high point of the song can be the end, but should not be the end, and that there should not be two high points. That a good song starts slow, builds up to the climax, and sort of finishes strong to the end, but not as high. And when we talk about the hero's journey and the story pyramid, all these things that we learn in middle and high school about how stories are constructed, the climax is never at the end of the story, and sometimes the highest moment isn't the climax. In the ancient Greek tragedies, the climax is not when everyone dies. In Shakespeare, the climax is not Desdemona and Othello poisoned. It's well before that. So that's why I was asking you, where is the high point? Where's the climax of this piece? Of the entire 18-song epic.
It has sort of an up and down kind of structure. There are high points and low points with increasing intensity. In fact, I forgot to mention this. Songs 17 and 18 are apotheosis, and I was born for this, but song 16 is called nadir, which is a word meaning the lowest point in a journey, right? And so you get this up and down sort of trend with low points and high points until you get the absolute lowest point, followed by the build up to the highest point, and then the absolute highest point. And so the climax, if you could say these are both climaxes, the absolute low point and the absolute high point, and they both occur right after one another at the end.
Well, my professor would be absolutely livid that anyone would dare to do that. No, but it's interesting because that cycle of low and high is present in the music as well. We build up and we calm back down, and we build up and we calm back down, and we build up and we calm back down. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And sometimes we calm way down, and sometimes we calm way up. We flight team stand up.
It's much like the journey of our lives.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. You know what? I'm completely sold on Journey now. It's the game of the year. It's just like
game of the year, climax at the end.
You do be climaxing to your art pieces. That's all I'm gonna say about you. Come on.
Go on.
Come on.
Go on.
Come on.
Keep talking.
No, come on.
It was very funny. It was very funny.
No, come on.
All right, yes, you're a comedic masterpiece. Your whole existence is.
That's all I need to hear is that my entire existence is a comedic masterpiece, and I can do no wrong. Is that so hard for people to do for me?
This show was called The Prince and the Jester, after all.
I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be the Joker as a Bob Dylan homage, but I realized that me, a white man, calling myself the Joker on the internet in the year of our Lord 2022 is.
I think that would have been lost on everyone.
I do not. I was gonna say I think the Dylan reference would be lost, and the school threat would have been picked up.
All right.
Anyway.
So what do you think this is saying by having the climax at the end?
What is it saying by having the climax at the end? I think it's saying that the journey is unfinished, frankly, because as you know, the climax of the story is not the end. There is the falling action. There's the denouement. There's things happen after the climax, right? Mm-hmm. And in music, things happen after the climax. My biggest complaint with ballets of the Rite of Spring is that they put the climax at the end, and then they rush the ending. Mm-hmm. If your highest moment is the end, to me that says that we're not done. That there is something off screen that is going to happen. There is more to the journey. That even though our journey is finished, Journey's journey is still going to go on. That there's something left unsaid. That there's something mysterious in the future. Is that a correct assessment of the game, or does the game not do that?
So at the beginning of the game, you start out just spawned. No, No. You think you start out spawned in the desert randomly, but at the beginning it shows a cinematic of this kind of comet of light streaming through the air and landing somewhere, and perhaps it is probably implied even on your first playthrough that you came from that comet, and at the end of the game. As you walk into the light at the top of this mountain with I was born for this playing, you are seen rocketing into the sky as a comet of light somewhere off into the distance. And so the implication is that that comet of light is going back to the beginning to start the journey anew. And so indeed, I think you picked up on that very well, that this journey is not over. In fact, it repeats from the very beginning. This cycle of highs and lows never ends.
Speaking of the Joker, the namesake comes from the first line of the Dylan song, "All Along the Watchtower." There must be some way out of here, said the Joker to the thief.
Okay.
And one of the things that I've heard pointed out about the song that I didn't consider until recently was the idea that it's cyclical, because it sort of picks up in the middle. There must be some way out of here, so the Joker to the thief. And the last line is, "All along the watchtower, princes kept the view, while barefoot something came and went, barefoot servants too. Outside in the distance, a wild cat did growl. 2 riders came approaching, the wind began to howl." And then the song ends. But the beginning is, "There must be some way out of here," said the Joker to the thief. And so I've heard the argument that actually those last 2 lines are at the beginning of the song. But it is a song whose climax is at the end. And you're right that maybe the climax... well, I'm right. I said it. That the climax at the end implies maybe a cyclical nature to the story. Well, you're right in saying, okay, the journey starts anew. Maybe we can expand that it's not there's more to say. Maybe having the climax at the end says, hey, maybe there's a cyclical nature to this. Because if the climax is at the end and the beginning is mysterious, perhaps it's a commentary on circles.
No, I think that's something we can probably extract to a lot of art now that we've noticed it. Like it just seems like such a, well, I don't have anything off the top of my head, but it just seems like such a natural idea, and it applies so well to both of these pieces of music that I think we need to look out for that idea in the future.
We do need to look out for that. Yeah, that's I'm happy that. I'm happy that I thought of that. That was like an actual, real thought that I had.
We're contributing to society.
No, we're not. We're the only person to contribute to society is me, because I work tech support. I'd be helping those old women.
Hey, I do research.
What do you mean you do research? What do you don't do?
I get paid for research.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I do. I help the grad student do the funny numbers.
You stack no paper. You stack no paper. You get no bitches.
Listen,
You get no bitch. You stack no paper. You get no bitches.
I told you it's like 12
bucks
an hour.
You have no females. You have no hoes. Maybe if you got a different yee ass haircut, you could get some bitches on your.
I have a yee ass haircut.